Sanders, it's a disgrace. And he does it for, the reason. The same thing with April Ryan. I watch her get up. I mean, you talk about somebody that's a loser. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. She gets publicity, and then she gets a pay raise, or she gets a contract with, I think, CNN. But she's very nasty, and she shouldn't be. She shouldn't be. You've got to treat the White House and the office of the presidency with respect. You have to speak up, Doug. You have a helicopter raging back. For all the people that don't know why, my hearing is great, but you have a helicopter that's raging back there. Do you remember Ronald Reagan? It always, what? I can't hear you. I always thought he was hard of hearing. He wasn't. That's the problem.
He wants to know what's going to happen when you meet with Putin.
Well, I'll meet with Putin at the G20. I don't know that we're seeing each other in Paris, but there may be a lunch for the leaders. I don't know. So I would say nothing. We have a good relationship. Having a good relationship with Russia and China and every other country is a good thing, not a bad thing. But we have a very good relationship.
Are you going to fire Ryan?
No, I'm going to look into any complaints. If there are any complaints, I'll look into it. Well, it was a political decision made by a judge. I think it's a disgrace. It's 48,000 jobs. I approved it. It's ready to start. And they went, and I guess they'll end up going to the Ninth Circuit as usual. We're slowly putting new judges in the Ninth Circuit. Everything goes to the Ninth Circuit. Everything. Now, DACA, that was actually good news yesterday because you never win in the Ninth Circuit if you're in this half of the equation. When I say half, it could be half or more. But you never win. You rarely win in the Ninth Circuit. The good news is, by rejecting DACA in the Ninth Circuit yesterday, finally, we've been waiting for that. We get to the Supreme Court, and we want to be in the Supreme Court on DACA. President Obama said he had no right to sign it. He had no right, but it was upheld in the Ninth Circuit, as usual. If you take President Obama's statement, he knew that he couldn't sign it. So this whole thing it's a terrible thing, what's happening with the courts. The DACA will now hopefully go to the Supreme Court, where we'll be given a fair decision. We'll be making a decision. I have so many people who want it. We are looking at Heather. We're looking at numerous people. We have plenty of time. Nikki is staying until the end of the year. We're working with Nikki also. We have some very good people that want that job. I'll make the decision over the next few weeks, but by the end of the year. Well, I have some very, very good people, but, I mean, there's no rush. You know, it has to go through a Senate process, which takes a long time, but we'll pick somebody that's great. We're going to pick somebody that's very good. And again, I think it's Matt Whitaker is a highly respected man, but I didn't know Matt Whitaker, but he's a highly respected man.
Matt Whitaker has not gone through the Senate process.
Yeah, but neither has Mueller. Excuse me. You talk about the Senate process. Mueller is doing a report. He hasn't gone through the Senate process. So you're saying Whitaker hasn't, but Whitaker has. Wait a minute. Because he was a really distinguished U.S. attorney in Iowa, and he was approved by everybody, because to be U.S. attorney, that's top of the line. He was a highly respected. In fact, I'll tell you, the ambassador to China, as you know, Terry Branstad, who used to be the governor of Iowa, he told me that what a great choice that is, that he is one of the most respected people in all of Iowa. And that was coming from Terry Branstad, who was the governor. Look, Mueller, a big complaint people have, Mueller was not Senate confirmed. So he's doing a report. He wasn't Senate confirmed. Whitaker was Senate confirmed, and now he doesn't need this, but he was Senate confirmed at the highest level when he was the U.S. attorney from Iowa. Mueller was not Senate confirmed. Why didn't they get him Senate confirmed? He should have been Senate confirmed. Because of all the conflicts, they didn't want to bring him before the Senate because he's very conflicted. So because of those conflicts, they didn't want to bring him before the Senate. But don't tell me about Whitaker. Don't tell me about Whitaker because Mueller was not Senate confirmed.
Mr. President, are you picking up more?
And Whitaker was, actually.
Sir, the Democrats keep picking up more seats in the House. Now more security.
It doesn't. Whether they get a couple of more House seats doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But you notice the votes never go the other way. They hire lawyers, and the votes don't ever seem to go the Republican way. Although I hear, well, I don't know. You tell me. It's always the Democrats. It's always GPS fusion. It's always crooked stuff. Look at what happened. How many FBI are gone? How many Justice Department people are gone? That I found out. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in this country, and we're finding out, and I'm getting to the bottom of it. And I've done a hell of a job. How many people have been fired from the FBI? You got Comey, you got McCabe, you got Strzok, you have Lisa Page, you have Baker, you have a whole list of people. There's a lot of crooked stuff going on. But it is interesting. It always seems to go the way of the Democrats. Now in Arizona, all of a sudden, out of the wilderness, they find a lot of votes, and the other candidate is just winning by a hair. What's going on in Florida is a disgrace. Go down and see what happened over the last period of time, 10 years. Take a look at Broward County. Take a look at the total dishonesty of what happened with respect to Broward County. Broward County, just press. Broward County /election. There's a lot of dishonesty.
Why do press secretaries share a doctor's video of an incident?
The taped video of Acosta? What are you talking about? All that was, nobody manipulated it. Give me a break. See, that's just dishonest reporting. All that is a close-up. See, that is just dishonest reporting. I watched that. I heard that last night. They made it close up. They showed it close up. And he was not nice to that young woman. I don't hold him for that because it wasn't overly, horrible. But all that was, when you say doctor, you're a dishonest guy because it wasn't doctored. They gave a close-up view. That's not doctoring.
Mr. President, are you thinking about more Supreme Court justices to discuss the in-person hospital?
No, I wish her well. She said something very inappropriate during the campaign, but she apologized for it. I wouldn't say she's exactly on my side, but I wish her well. I hope she gets better, and I hope she serves in the Supreme Court for many, many years. Terrible. What are we going to do about He's a very sick, it's a mental health problem. He is a very sick puppy. It was a very, very sick guy. Not too many people knew about it, but now that they're looking, they're starting to see he had a lot of problems, a lot of trouble, and we're very much into that. As you know, I funded a lot of money toward mental health for that reason, and we're continuing to do it, and we continue to look at the laws. We want to make sure, look, it is a problem. It's a disastrous problem. It makes you sick to look at it. But he was a very, very mentally ill person. Say it.
Firearms play any part in this mental health conversation?
Well, he was a war veteran. He was a Marine. He was in the war. He served time. He saw some pretty bad things. And a lot of people say he had the PTSD. And that's a tough deal. We're spending, as you know, I've given tremendous funding to the vets for the PTSD and for general health for PTSD. It's a big problem. People come back. That's why it's a horrible thing. They come back. They're never the same.
Are you prepared to fly that flag at half-mast a lot more?
Well, I don't like abusing any privilege, but when I see something that we should do, I always do that. Yeah, I always do that.
Are you going to California?
I believe you should. When it's a worthy situation, I do believe it.
Whitaker to be involved in the Russia probe. Do you want him to,
That's up to him.
Do you want him to rein in Robert Mueller?
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
You guys are out of President signed an executive order on birthright citizenship this week. Why did that?
We're working well because other things have come up, and we will be signing it soon.
Was it a political stunt?
No. We're signing it. We're doing it, and it'll probably work its way up to the Supreme Court. Birthright citizenship probably works its way up to the Supreme Court. It will be signed. We wanted a perfect document, and because of the election and all of the delays of the election and whatever's going on in Broward County, remember the word Broward County.
Is there any evidence of
Wait, well, you take a look at the past. Take a look at the past, and all of a sudden they're finding votes. You mean after the election, they're finding votes? And then you look at her past where she's already been convicted, and now they're finding votes? And you have this guy, Elias, who represented Hillary Clinton and a lot of very shady things. I think what you ought to do is get smart. Good luck, folks. I'll see you in Europe.
One of my kids is homesick today, and I believe they're watching TV, so I just want to say to him, as I always do, son, there's no stupid questions, but there are stupid answers. I am Stephanie Ruhle here in New York City for MSNBC. That was President Trump speaking there at the White House before leaving for his trip to Paris. He talked about a lot of things: Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, Robert Mueller, and the future of the Mueller investigation. Hans Nichols is at the White House with us for more. Okay, Hans, help me out. The president says he doesn't know Matt Whitaker. I want to pull up the New York Times on September 26th. About the Oval Office, and is said to have an easy chemistry with Mr. Trump. On Monday morning, Mr. Trump himself called Mr. Whitaker, not with an explicit job offer, but a reassurance that he has faith in him. I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you know anything about that?
Well, we know that Matt Whitaker was in the Oval frequently with Sessions when they were meeting, but we don't have an exact readout of those meetings because it's awfully tough to be inside the Oval. What's clear is the president's trying to put some distance between himself and Matt Whitaker, and it's also clear, Stephanie, that he wants to make it like this is just an interim appointment. He's still looking at a permanent appointment. When he was asked about Chris Christie, he gave perhaps what we're going to call a Trumpian tell, and that is, he said Christie endorsed him right after he got out of the presidential race. That could be an indication that Chris Christie is atop the list for the next attorney general. But listen to what the president said, and then we'll get on the back end on these other fronts the president is fighting. But listen to how the president was clearly trying to put some distance between himself and Whitaker.
I don't know Matt Whitaker. Matt Whitaker worked for Jeff Sessions, and he was always extremely highly thought of, and he still is. But I didn't know Matt Whitaker. He worked for Attorney General Sessions. He was very, very highly thought of.
Stephanie, there are a lot of lessons from World War I. The president's off there to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the end of that war. One of them was don't fight on multiple fronts. You just heard a president take on so many different perceived enemies, opening up new lines of attack on Robert Mueller. The new line of attack is that Mueller apparently, we know he's not Senate confirmed, but now that's disqualifying for President Trump. Mueller should have been Senate confirmed, even though he was Senate confirmed as the FBI director. You also heard him unleash a broadside against President Obama, accusing him of hollowing out the military. Let's be clear, President Trump has continued Obama's policies with some minor tweaks, but basically the same policy in Afghanistan and in the fight against ISIS. You heard some broadsides against Florida election officials down in Broward County. And then once again, for a president that says he dislikes the press so much, he's always willing to come out, and he really seems to relish his challenging his conflicts with the press. He called Jim Acosta, I believe, not very smart about April Ryan, another colleague in the White House press corps. He called her a total loser. We're continuing to see these ad hominem attacks from the President of the United States on individual reporters. It's clear that his escalations against the press are going to continue, and that he sees no self-interest, Donald Trump does, of backing down. Stephanie?
I just want to make sure I have that in my notes. He called April Ryan a total loser. I was trying to think back because I know there's at least one person in the White House who considers herself a champion for women, an advocate for women and girls. And when you stand up for something, when you have the honor to be called a champion for women and girls, you stand up for your sisters. I'm looking at you, Ivanka Trump. Your dad because you are a senior White House advisor, called April Ryan a loser yesterday. What do you have to say about it? Because I am a champion for women and girls. And you know what I think? He's dead wrong. All right, Hans Nichols, thank you. With us now, Kim Whaley, former assistant U.S. attorney, now a professor at the University of Baltimore School of Law. And on set with me, Matt Welch, editor-at-large for Reason Magazine, along with my friend Christine Quinn, vice chair of the New York State Democratic Party and former speaker of the New York City Council. Okay, Kim, to you first. Matt Whitaker, I get it. The president says he's highly respected. He's highly respected. He's totally respected. But the president also said he doesn't know Matt Whitaker. That doesn't seem to be the case. Does it matter?
Well, it's not a credible claim. We know that he's been upset with Jeff Sessions from day one because he recused himself from the Russia investigation. We also know he said that the Attorney General should be like his Roy Cohn, who was Senator McCarthy's right-hand person during the legitimate witch hunt in the anti-communist era. And so the question now really comes down to what's going to be the consequences for him essentially putting his own referee in this position, who certainly does have some control over the Mueller investigation. There are two options. One is Congress, and the other would be the courts. And there's some questions as to whether, in my mind, that kind of case would even be accepted, who would have standing to challenge this appointment. But there certainly are some deep constitutional limitations, and the president is kind of out there spewing misinformation about basic principles of law. And I would just encourage all listeners to educate themselves on some core concepts, including the appointment process. I mean, Robert Mueller is not a principal officer under Article 2 of the Constitution. He does not require Senate appointment and confirmation, or presidential appointment and confirmation for this particular position. So that's just a bunch of baloney.
Okay, Kim, well, I'm going to study up this weekend, but how about fellow Republicans? Is there anything legally standing between Matt Whitaker accepting this appointment and others to get involved? Yes, we've seen an op-ed from George Conway and other legal scholars who have said, no, this is unconstitutional. Is there anything that can truly block this appointment, or is it just opinion?
Well, as I mentioned, I read that piece, and I've done a lot of research on this concept. I'm writing a book on the Constitution, and I think that he's absolutely right that there is a question constitutionally as to whether someone in the position of Attorney General could pull and push the levers of power in that position, especially at this moment in history without Senate confirmation process. I mean, we're now seeing things play out in the press with respect to whether Mr. Whitaker is the appropriate person for this position, whether he's compromised, whether he's had things in his background that would give us pause. That's the reason for a confirmation process, to make sure that he's in the proper position. But as I said before, you know, if someone runs a red light and no cop pulls them over, they ran the red light. In this instance, if the president is going to make this appointment, even if it's illegal, if there's no pushback, if there's no consequence, he gets away with it. So it would either be the courts, someone would have to file a challenge basically saying this appointment's unconstitutional, please judge block this appointment, or number two, Congress would just have to put political pressure on him to do something different. There isn't anything, I think, other than investigations in the House that Congress could do to actually stop it. It would have to be the court system or just general political pressure, which this president seems more and more emboldened to just ignore.
Okay, I want to share two pieces of sound. We played it before. I want to play it again. The president specifically speaking about Matt Whitaker.
I didn't speak to Matt Whitaker about it. I don't know Matt Whitaker. Matt Whitaker has a great reputation, and that's what I wanted.
But the president does watch cable news. I want to share what Matt Whitaker said back in 2017 about potential collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign.
The truth is, there was no collusion with the Russians and the Trump campaign. There was interference by the Russians into the election, but that is not the collusion with the campaign. And that's where the left seems to be just combining those two issues. And the last thing they want right now is the truth to come out, and the fact that there is not a single piece of evidence that demonstrates that the Trump campaign had any illegal or even improper relationships with Russians. I mean, it's that simple.
Okay, left, right, and center, everyone is guilty of conflating multiple issues, but Matt Whitaker cannot say the truth is there was no collusion. The truth is he has no way of knowing. Matt Welch, what is your take on all of this? Matt Whitaker has some serious opinions, and he's made them clear.
And those opinions got him the job.
Yep.
His friend encouraged him to start becoming a cable news contributor, because that's how you get on President Trump's radar screen, because he's a cable news junkie there, which already says something that we should stand back and pause. The president is making personnel decisions, which he's made a lot of, based on who he sees talking on TV and defending him. It speaks very badly. I think what we need to see right now, and it's going to be an early litmus test of the new Senate, right? The Senate is going to extend its Republican majority by a little bit, but it also got more Trumpy. That Republican majority is more Trump-like. Jeff Flake is out, Bob Corker is out. The people that Trump fought for and won tight races in Indiana and elsewhere feel like they owe a debt to Trump. So will Mitch McConnell, right now, in a pretty clear case that, as George Conway laid out, that this is probably unconstitutional and definitely unseemly. So will Mitch McConnell do anything? We will find out in the next week. And you will lose money betting on Mitch McConnell.
Unseemly, unconstitutional, great, super. Christine, unless the Senate steps in and blocks this, he's not going to recuse himself. The fact they're saying, well, ethics lawyers are looking at this, fantastico.
Right, and ethics lawyers are going to find out exactly what the president wants them to find out.
Or they'll find out something different, but it doesn't mean he's going to listen to them.
No, not at all. Look, there really are, as has been said, two options. A court case brought by some organization immediately, or the Senate standing up and acting like the United States Senate, which I have absolutely no hope of happening. And the case, as I understand it, is pretty clear. I mean, to boil it down to the most basic, if you report directly to the president, you need Senate confirmation. Robert Mueller does not report to the president. There's people in between him and the president. He doesn't need Senate confirmation. I mean, that's very simplified, but it is the nuts and the bolts of it. And this is just another example. Unless the Republicans stand up and defend the Constitution, they're just rolling over for Donald Trump yet again.
Wow, we have a lot more to cover. Kim, Matt, Christine, please stick around. We're going to take a quick break. Coming up, the special counsel has some powerful new allies on Capitol Hill. We're going to talk about the Democrats who are soon going to control the House. But what are they going to realistic? House Democrats will wield their new power once the gavel is officially turned over next year. NBC News got its hands on a 67-page document showing the Democrats' plan to prioritize issues far beyond the Russia investigation, including immigration and health care, things people voted for. But right now, the Mueller probe, of course, is front and center, with House Judiciary Committee Democrats calling for an emergency hearing following the firing of Jeff Sessions. Here's what the incoming House Oversight Chairman Elijah Cummings said the American people should expect come January.
We're to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And part of that, Rachel, of that oath is about the business of being a check on the executive branch. They should expect that, and I promise you they will get that.
Joining me now to discuss this and more, Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State, who is also a member of the Judiciary Committee. Congresswoman, I want to first ask you about the conference call convened yesterday by Nancy Pelosi with the entire Democratic caucus. Politico wrote about it and said this: it was the first caucus-wide call for the incoming majority and was meant, sources familiar with the planning say, to convey the depth of the crisis moment. That's a heavy statement. What can you tell us about the call? What was covered?
Well, I think that that's absolutely right. We are in a position that really could lead to a constitutional crisis, and we needed everybody, including our new members, to understand exactly what has led up to this point. And I think that you and your guests have articulated that there are many levels here. One is a legal issue of whether there's whether it's constitutional for the president to appoint Matt Whitaker to this position of acting attorney general. There's the question of, is he capable, if the president was going to keep him there for unspecified period of time, which it seems that he might. That is an issue for Congress as well. And then finally, there's the issue of what it means for the Mueller investigation. And does everything that Matt Whitaker has said and done and his ties, does it preclude him from being an impartial overseer of this investigation? And we have tremendous concerns because everything that he has said from his auditions for this position on conservative television, which is how the president seems to choose his top officials, calling this a witch hunt. You know, his ties to Sam Clovis, who is a key witness in the Mueller probe, the fact that he wrote an op-ed that told the president that he should do everything he could to shut down the, quote, Mueller lynch mob. These are all statements that make it very clear that he cannot possibly oversee this investigation impartially. And so our position as Democrats is this is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is an issue of our Constitution, making sure that nobody is above the law, including the president. Robert Mueller is conducting a special investigation that has produced enormous results already. 33 people who have been indicted, 5 of Trump's top campaign officers, his campaign manager, his deputy campaign manager, his personal lawyer. These are people who have already pled guilty, not to small charges, but charges of interfering with the election, charges of obstruction of justice. I mean, these are serious charges that Mueller has uncovered, and we need to make sure to protect the special counsel's investigation.
And how serious will you get to do that? Yesterday, Congressman Jerry Nadler from New York talked about trying to force the passage of a bill to protect Mueller. And I wonder, would Democrats be willing to force a government shutdown just to protect Robert Mueller?
Well, we certainly have to do everything we can to protect the Constitution. Our hope is that Republicans will join us. That bill, Stephanie, was actually a bill that was passed through the Senate Judiciary Committee in a bipartisan way, but unfortunately, Majority Leader McConnell refused to bring it to the floor.
Why?
So it stayed stuck. Well, what he said at the time, which was disingenuous at best, but, you know, what he said at the time is there's no need. The special counsel's investigation is protected. Rod Rosenstein is overseeing it, and now it becomes clear that it is necessary.
Okay, then we'll stay with us. You had bipartisan support before, and Mitch McConnell, who is in control, said, nope, I don't think so. Mitch McConnell won't be in control going forward, but do you think you'll still get that kind of bipartisan support? Because from the Senate perspective, things got Trumpier.
Yes, things got Trumpier, exactly. Well, we will have control in the House. We can pass that bill in the House with only Democratic support if we have to, but I really hope we have Republicans. Mitch McConnell will be in control of the Senate, or at least it looks like that is the case right now. And I hope that enough Republicans will step up and recognize that, you know, when Robert Mueller came on, everybody praised him. He is a Republican. He is highly competent. And now, as the investigation starts to close in, these Republicans are just standing up for Trump and not standing up for the Constitution. So what we're hoping is, number one, that Matt Whitaker recuses himself from the investigation. He should recuse himself. That would take a significant question off the table. Give it back to Rod Rosenstein, who has been managing this investigation. Let the investigation conclude.
All right. We know he's not going to
do that.
We know he's not going to.
You know, it's always worth putting out the call, though.
You want to have your ducks in a row. Quickly before we go, Nancy Pelosi, should you be the next Speaker of the House? Will you support her?
I think that Nancy Pelosi has done an incredible job. I think we need to make sure that all of the voices of the caucus are represented. I'm running to be the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. I want to make sure to check in with the new members of the Progressive Caucus, see where we are. We know we want to see progressive leadership in the leadership of the caucus, and so that is going to be a critical piece for us. It's not just about Nancy Pelosi. It's about all of the positions and how do we make sure the voices of the caucus are represented. Progressives helped win this majority. That is clear. And progressives in Florida and Texas, even though those races are still too close to count at the top of the ticket, helped drive wins in those states. Progressives in California, running on bold ideas, were winning, and that is what gave us our majority. So our job is to make sure that all of the voices are represented, and we'll see where we end up at the end of next week.
All right, Congresswoman Jayapal, thank you so much for joining me this morning. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, it is never an election in America without a little drama or a whole lot. And this year didn't disappoint. Florida, yep, we're here again. Florida now prepping itself for multiple recounts.
Every couple of hours, it goes down a little bit.
President Trump just a short time ago on the races for Senate and governor down in Florida, which could possibly be headed for a recount. Officials are still counting absentee, provisional, and overseas ballots. And as of right now, newly counted votes have pushed Democrats Andrew Gillum and Senator Bill Nelson closer to their Republican opponents and within the threshold to trigger an automatic recount. In the race for Senate, Senator Bill Nelson is down less than 1/4 of a point, and in the race for governor, Andrew Gillum is down less than 1/2 a point. Under Florida law, a margin smaller than 1/2 a point triggers a machine recount. If the margin falls below 1/4 of a point, it triggers a more thorough manual recount. We got an amazing team of road warriors still out there closely following these new developments. Let's start with NBC's Ali Vitale in Tallahassee. Okay, where do we know these races are at this point and the recount?
Stephanie, so what's going on right now, and when we'll hear about an official recount happening, is tomorrow at noon, because what's happening right now is the counties are still canvassing. You mentioned that they're counting those absentee, those provisional ballots, overseas military, things like that. So that's why you're seeing the margins tighten over the course of the past few days. Now, Rick Scott has spoken to media. Last night we were at the governor's mansion, and he was pretty fiery about the margins tightening and why he thinks that might be. Take a listen.
Every day since the election, the left-wing activists in Broward County have been coming up with more and more ballots out of nowhere. Their goal is to keep mysteriously finding more votes until the election turns out the way they want. I will not sit idly by while unethical liberals try to steal this election from the great people of Florida.
And so he's saying that they're coming out of nowhere. The Broward and Palm Beach County supervisors are saying that these are provisional ballots that they're continuing to count. But what's important is that we know that these races are really close. We know that the Scott Nelson race is within that 0.25 margin that you were talking about, where it should trigger a hand recount. And we know that the Gillum DeSantis race is within that 0.5% margin. But we don't really officially know that yet. So that's what Saturday's canvasses are going to do for us, is that's when the automatic recounts in both of those races will be triggered, and that's when that process will actually start to be started, Stephanie.
All right, Ali, thank you so much. Now let's head up to Georgia, where votes are still being counted in the race for governor. That is too close to call this morning. Republican Brian Kemp is leading Stacey Abrams with about 50.3% of total votes. But if his share drops below 50%, it would automatically trigger a runoff in December. NBC's Morgan Radford is in Atlanta. Okie doke. Brian Kemp is claiming victory anyway, but that doesn't matter.
Well, Stephanie, Brian Kemp said he is headed to the governor's mansion. He already said he's going to begin his transition because his message to the Abrams team is, look, there's only about 20,000 ballots that are still outstanding. And even if you won all of them, you still wouldn't have enough to become governor, because here in Georgia, you need more than 50% of the vote. But on the other hand, Stephanie, Stacey Abrams' team says, we don't accept your victory. In fact, we suspect there are more than those thousands of votes that you mentioned that are still out there, provisional and absentee ballots. That's why they are making a full throttle effort today to make sure those ballots are marked by 5 p.m., especially when it comes to those people who are voting in the military or overseas. But Stephanie, we do have new news at the top of this hour in terms of what happens next. This all comes down to when those counties are going to certify their vote totals. We understand from the Abrams team, they said that while Kemp was in office, when he was Secretary of State and his office was overseeing this election, he never gave the counties any timeline, deadline, or guidance as to what to do with those vote totals, especially given that Monday is a federal holiday, Veterans Day. So do the counties turn in their votes on Monday or on Tuesday? Our reporting seems to confirm that there is confusion about that. In one hand, we have two big counties here, Cobb County and Fulton County. Cobb County officials tell us they're going to turn in their ballots on Monday. Fulton County says they're going to turn in their ballots on Tuesday. So there's still confusion, and it doesn't look like we will hear anything before then. Stephanie?
All right, Morgan Radford, thank you so much. And we're keeping an eye on that razor-close Arizona Senate race. This morning, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema edges ahead of Republican Martha McSally, taking the lead for the first time since Election Day by just over 9,000 votes. This race is still too close to call. Almost 500,000 ballots are yet to be counted. Okie doke, I got to ask my panel on this one. What's your take on all this?
Well, I have a couple of takes. One, that the entire voting system in America, and New York leads the way, is a disgrace, right? How could you have 500,000 ballots not counted or put into the mix in one state in one election? Two, you know, this idea that liberals in Florida are finding ballots like we've been stockpiling them in our garages or on the lanai or something makes no sense at all. And many of these ballots...
I mean, Christine just dated herself with the lanai right there. Okay,
Golden
Mrs. Howell.
girls,
Thank you. Yes.
You know, many of these ballots are from people in the military. What a disgusting comment for him to have made, just kind of disregarding the significance of people in the military and their right to vote. I think this has frightened people who see it slipping away on the Republican Party just lashing out.
But
all right, Blanche gave her view. Rose, what do you think?
There is some unusual things happening in Broward County, regardless of whether you attach conspiracy to it. Under the Florida Public Records Act, you're supposed to tell them how many votes there are that you're counting.
That's true.
We have X number of votes. What's the number? And the legal filings are basically saying don't stop counting. They're just saying, can you tell us the number? Every other county has told us the number. You have it. So that is another episode in Broward County's long history of botching basic things. And as Steve Kornacki has pointed out well on his Twitter feed, there's some pretty unusual things with the ballot design, too, in Broward that might have something to do with the way that county compared to other ones have undercounted. It is
Let's
amazing.
do better. We asked everyone to go out there and vote. So many of you did. All of your votes should count. Me and the Golden Girls will be back in 2 minutes. Coming up, what the victims of the California bar mass
shootings that we are seeing almost on a daily basis in this country now. I want to show you now the names of 11 of the 12 victims of this shooting from the Thousand Oaks shooting the other night. I won't read all of these names, and unfortunately for those of you maybe listening on satellite radio, go to our website. I encourage you. Our digital team has put together some nice profiles of some of these victims, so they're more than just a name to you. But you saw that mother in anguish there. Here's another parent in anguish at losing his son here in Thousand Oaks. Take a look.
His name was Cody Kaufman, my firstborn son. Only him and I know how much I love, how much I miss him. Oh, God, this is so... Oh, son, I love you so much.
Obviously, the pain is just so apparent and real and raw for not just the parents who've lost loved ones here, but friends who've lost their friends. This is a surreal event for people in this community. They thought that this was a safe community, and parents who sent their kids to that bar and let them go and be entertained there thought that place was safe too, and no longer think that. Steph?
What we define as safe and what we define as dangerous maybe needs to be redefined. Ron, thank you so much for some extraordinary and important reporting out there. Here to join us now is someone else who does extraordinary work, my friend Nicole Hockley. She lost her 6-year-old son, Dylan. He died in the 2012 Sandy Hook elementary school shooting. She's also the managing director of Sandy Hook Promise, which provides prevention programs to stop gun violence. Nicole, after this shooting, we just saw a moment ago a mother say, no more guns, no more guns. We hear that after every one of these shootings, but that's not what we hear from you. From you and the work you do, it's about before the guns are even in anyone's hands. So walk me through how you feel today and what you want done.
Well, today, I mean, listening to those parents, I'm permanently heartbroken now because every single shooting breaks our hearts again, and it's just becoming too much to bear. As a country, those stats are awful. Those beautiful faces gone. It's just not acceptable. And I understand that raw pain from that mother and her demands, and I've been there. But I also know that there's nothing that we can do about the guns right now. There are so many in the country. So let's instead focus on what we can do to help someone before they pick up a weapon to hurt themselves or someone else. There's so much that can be done in the field of prevention and recognizing signs and signals. It helps with suicide. It helps with homicide. We've already trained over 5 million people how to do this. We know that gun violence is preventable when you know the signs. We can't stop it all, but we can save a lot of people by learning what to look for.
You know firsthand, why hasn't anything been done since Dylan lost his life. To that mother who just yesterday was begging for no more guns, you were in her position just a few years ago. We're looking at Dylan's picture right now. And every time one of these shootings happen, we sit at a desk just like the one I'm at and say something will change, and it doesn't. Why is that the case? I know you know this firsthand.
This is an incredibly complex issue, and it's a very polarizing and divisive issue. And in my opinion, it's because all we have done is focus on policy around taking guns away or giving more guns. And it's this constant fight between the far right and the far left on guns. We're not doing enough to focus on the common ground between those two sides, which is what are we going to do to keep our kids safe? How are we going to focus on the people side of this equation? Because this isn't just about guns. It's about guns and it's about people. And we need to look at both sides of the equation and say, what do we need to do to put aside our differences and focus on that common ground of we just want to keep our kids safe? Prevention is one of those ways to do that. And if all we ever do is keep the fight going, that's when people disengage from this. They think it's never going to happen to them. They think their community is safe. They think that they don't have to worry about this because this is the sort of stuff that happens somewhere else. It doesn't happen somewhere else. It happens in your community. It happens where we all live, and we can all engage in this issue and know that we can do things in our own communities to keep our kids safe. Just put aside our differences and focus on what we need to do to provide safety.
I know you are, or Sandy Hook Promise is working with the people of Thousand Oaks to help them through this. But for you, a mom who lost Dylan just a few years ago, what is your message to those moms now who lost their kids in the last couple of days?
This is sometimes when there are no words. My heart is open to them. My heart is bleeding again for them. And will continue to bleed for all the moms and dads out there. It's not right what is happening. It's not right for anyone to lose a life. For a parent to have to bury their child is just something that I would never wish on anybody. And I'm holding them in my heart and hoping that they will find their way through this, because there is a way through this when they're ready.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your life's work. I wouldn't want to bring my panel in on this. Christine, look where we are again.
I saw a tweet from someone that said the worst mass shooting in 11 days, which is really sets you back. To think about how many of these happen and so often, and how many of them happen in places where people are looking for solace and support, whether that's at a synagogue or listening to music. You know, the mom we just heard from, she's talking common sense. Let's find the points where we can come together and come together. She has every right to be furious, livid, hate every elected official for not doing anything, but she's talking about coming together. It just continues to baffle me why the NRA is not willing to come to the table on anything at all. But what I do know, and if anybody is feeling overwhelmed and they can't continue to fight on this, just look at that Sandy Hook mom. She's fighting. She's offering her heart to people who just went through the trauma she went through. So we have to find ways to come together and just redouble our efforts, because in the end, all those beautiful children, all those brave law enforcement officers, we have to keep fighting for them.
Matt, last point.
I think there's wisdom in what she said about it's a complicated problem. California has some of the most strict gun control laws in the country, and they didn't stop any of this, universal background checks and all this kind of stuff. Guns are part of it, and so is a lot of other things too. And finding ways to have these conversations in an atmosphere not of extreme polarization all the time, but looking what can be done and understanding that the world is a complicated place. That's the beginning of something.
We got to come together on this. It shouldn't be a polarizing issue. Just for one moment, I just want to talk about fear for a second. In the last 2 weeks, fear was put in the hearts and minds of people across this country about migrants coming on a caravan. This isn't us versus them. While that fear about them was put in our minds, we saw 12 young people who were dancing in a bar get shot and killed. 11 people in a synagogue.